The glass doors hissed open with a hydraulic whisper, and the lobby of the Sterling Regent Hotel unfolded like a cathedral of wealth. Crystal chandeliers hung from the ceiling like frozen constellations, scattering light across polished marble floors so pristine they reflected every stiletto heel and leather loafer that crossed them. A pianist in a tuxedo coaxed delicate notes from a grand Steinway in the corner, the soft rise and fall of music weaving into the hum of moneyed conversation. Perfume, cologne, and the faint scent of polished oak fused into an intoxicating aroma of affluence. This was a place designed to impress, to intimidate, to remind every soul who walked through its glass doors that they were in the presence of luxury curated for the select few. Through those doors walked a man who carried no entourage, no bodyguards, no visible signs of needing approval. Just a single leather briefcase in one hand and an air of self-possession that seemed to bend the room's gravity toward him. He didn't walk hurriedly. He didn't stride like he had something to prove. He moved with the calm precision of someone used to occupying boardrooms, palaces, and airports with equal ease. Someone who had learned long ago that true power never needed to rush. His name was Nathaniel Cole, and tonight he was just checking into his own hotel. The receptionist, a young woman in a crisp navy blazer, looked up from her screen as he approached. Her rehearsed smile wavered when her eyes fell on him. Just a flicker, just long enough to betray that instant calculation that lived in the service industry. Rich guest or wrong guest. She pushed it back quickly, layering her voice with practiced warmth. "Good evening, sir. Welcome to the Sterling Regent. May I have your name?" Nathaniel Cole. His baritone rolled out evenly, quiet yet unmissable. Her fingers flew across the keyboard, tapping into the reservation system. For a second, her smile froze. A shadow of confusion passed across her face. She double-checked the screen, then again. She swallowed. "One moment, please." Nathaniel said nothing. He simply adjusted the briefcase in his hand and waited. The young woman's hesitation drew eyes. In luxury hotels, efficiency is its own performance, and anything less than seamless stands out like a sour note in a symphony. A couple at the check-in counter nearby glanced over. A concierge paused mid-conversation. The pianist missed a note. She turned a back office door, her voice a little too tight. "Mr. Wexler, could you join me a moment?" The man who emerged looked like he'd been sculpted to play the role of manager in a film. Mid-40s, slick back hair glistening under the chandelier, a suit so sharply tailored it almost sliced the air when he moved. His name tag read, Thomas Wexler, General Manager. His smile was polished, but his eyes were already narrowed, assessing. "Good evening, sir," Wexler said, stepping forward with an extended hand he didn't quite expect to be taken. "I understand you arrived to check in." Nathaniel inclined his head. Presidential suite. Reservation under Cole. Wexler clasped his hands behind his back, rocking slightly on his polished shoes. "Yes, well, I've reviewed the booking. It seems there's been a miscommunication." The lobby hushed a fraction. That word, miscommunication, carried a weight that needed no explanation. Nathaniel's gaze didn't flinch. "Explain." Wexler cleared his throat, his voice lifting in volume, as though projecting for an audience. "The suite you reserved is unfortunately not available tonight. It's currently prepared for another guest, a VIP client we simply cannot displace." There it was. Clear, clean, dismissive. A ripple of unease moved through the lobby. Guests checking in slowed their movements. The pianist's hands hovered over the keys. Even the bellhops by the revolving door stiffened, instinctively sensing that something had shifted. Nathaniel placed his briefcase gently on the marble counter. His hands rested lightly on it, fingers unmoving. "I booked the suite weeks ago." Wexler nodded, lips tightening. Yes, I see that. But sometimes in hospitality, we have to make adjustments. I'm sure you'll understand." He leaned closer, lowering his tone just enough to be insulting. "We'd be happy to provide you with a deluxe room instead. Very comfortable. Fits most guests' needs quite well." Most guests. The words dangled in the air, heavy with insinuation. Behind Nathaniel, a businessman whispered to his wife, "Isn't the suite as already? What's going on?" She shushed him, eyes glued to the unfolding scene. Another guest discreetly angled his phone camera, recording. Nathaniel's silence was more piercing than anger. He tilted his head just slightly, studying Wexler like a man might study an insect on glass. His voice, when it came, was even softer than before. Are you saying the presidential suite is not available because it's been double booked, or because you have chosen to give it away? Wexler's smile faltered. It's complicated. Not complicated, Nathaniel said calmly, cutting through the lobby with a voice that carried despite its quietness. A yes or no will suffice. The manager's jaw tightened. His arrogance flared to mask his unease. The suite is occupied by a guest of higher importance. That is our policy. I'm sure you can appreciate that. There was, spoken clearly now, the mask fully off. Gasps flickered through the lobby. The pianist's hands dropped entirely from the keys. The only sound was the muted hum of the fountain in the center of the room. Nathaniel's eyes locked on Wexler's, unblinking. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. His presence, his composure, his deliberate calm drew every gaze toward him. Repeat what you just said. Wexler's throat bobbed. Sir, as I mentioned... Louder, Nathaniel interrupted, his voice like iron wrapped in velvet. So everyone in this lobby can hear exactly what you've said to me. And now, every guest in the lobby leaned in, phones tilted upward, eyes fixed on the confrontation. The spotlight was no longer just on Nathaniel Cole. It was on Thomas Wexler, a man who had no idea who he was truly speaking to. Wexler adjusted his tie, flustered but unwilling to back down. He squared his shoulders and raised his chin, speaking louder. Our presidential suite has been reserved for a VIP client. We do not believe that you... He hesitated a fraction too long, then pushed the word out like a knife. Qualify as such. The word echoed like a gunshot in the marble chamber of the lobby. Nathaniel did not flinch. He did not blink. He simply let the word hang there, cold and ugly, a judgment that every ear in the lobby had now heard. The room was silent. Then, with the smallest of gestures, Nathaniel reached for his phone. He tapped the screen once, raised it to his ear. His voice, quiet and clear, carried across the hushed expanse. Proceed, he said, effective immediately. He ended the call, slid the phone back into his pocket, and picked up his briefcase. Then he stepped aside, moving toward the velvet-lined lounge chairs as though nothing had happened. The lobby buzzed with whispers, uncertain, electrified. The manager, flushed with self-satisfaction, smirked, still oblivious that the ground beneath him had already begun to crack. Nathaniel sat calmly, crossing one leg over the other. He glanced once toward the chandeliers, then back at the trembling young receptionist who had first greeted him. She looked away quickly, shame burning her cheeks. The stage was set. The storm had begun. If you're enjoying this story, please subscribe to support the channel. The Sterling Regent lobby was designed to exude power, not to contain it. Yet in that moment, all of its grandeur, the crystal chandeliers, the towering marble columns, the gold leaf archways, seemed to shrink beneath the weight of one man's silence. Nathaniel Cole sat in a velvet lounge chair, briefcase at his side, posture relaxed yet unreadable. He was not a man who fidgeted, not a man who rushed to defend himself. And that stillness, in a world addicted to noise, was unbearable for those around him, especially for Thomas Wexler, the general manager, who mistook Nathaniel's calm for weakness. Wexler smoothed his lapel, drawing a theatrical breath, and spoke louder now, his voice pitched for the room, for the gawking guests who had already begun to circle like spectators at an unplanned play. Ladies and gentlemen, I apologize for the disturbance, he announced, flashing a politician's smile. We take pride in our service here at the Sterling Regent, but occasionally we face situations where certain expectations do not align with policy. Murmurs rippled across the lobby. Phones tilted higher, recording. Nathaniel's eyes remained on him, steady, unblinking. Wexler leaned against the counter, adopting the smug posture of someone convinced the stage was his. This gentleman, he gestured toward Nathaniel with an open palm, has requested accommodations that, unfortunately, are reserved for guests of special distinction. The presidential suite is not, at this time, available to everyone. The pause before the last word was deliberate, the kind of pause that dripped poison. A woman near the piano whispered sharply. Did he just say that? Her husband shifted uncomfortably, shaking his head, but not looking away. Nathaniel spoke for the first time since making his phone call, his voice soft enough that people leaned closer to catch it. I requested nothing. I booked it. The simplicity of it. No flourish, no defense, just fact. Landed heavier than Wexler's grandstanding. But Wexler doubled down. Be that as it may, he said, tightening his smile until it looked like a sneer. Guests of our establishment must understand that sometimes their expectations exceed their standing. Standing, Nathaniel repeated, his voice measured. Yes, Wexler said, seizing the word as though it gave him ground to stand on. Our clientele for the presidential suite are world leaders, international figures, titans of industry. We simply cannot make exceptions. I'm sure a deluxe room would be far more appropriate. After all, comfort is relative. A cough of disbelief broke from somewhere in the crowd. A man in a tailored suit muttered, he has no idea who he's talking to. His companion elbowed him a hush, but eyes glittered with anticipation. Nathaniel's gaze swept the lobby, not defensive, not seeking sympathy, but deliberately acknowledging every witness, every phone camera, every pair of wide eyes watching the scene unfold. Then he returned his gaze to Wexler. Say it plainly, Nathaniel said. You've implied enough. Speak the truth you're circling. For the first time, Wexler faltered. His smile wavered, but his pride was too inflated to retreat. He straightened, raising his chin. Very well, he said, voice loud now, echoing across the marble chamber. We reserve our most prestigious accommodations for clientele that reflect the stature of this hotel. We cannot hand them over to just anyone who flashes a credit card. The words rang out like a slap. Gasps scattered the room. The pianist stood abruptly, abandoning the keys altogether. Nathaniel didn't move. His silence was suffocating. His composure mirrored that magnified Wexler's arrogance. A guest near the elevator hissed, That's disgusting. Another whispered, Isn't he the one on the right? Someone else whispered back, Shoo, this is going viral already. Wexler, sensing the eyes on him, doubled down, desperate to assert dominance. He leaned closer to Nathaniel, voice dipped in condescension, loud enough to ensure no one missed a syllable. You people need to understand, he said. The two words, you people, cracked like a whip across the lobby. A woman gasped audibly. A man dropped his phone in shock. Even the young receptionist, who had been frozen behind her screen, flinched as though struck. Nathaniel finally moved. Slowly, deliberately, he unfolded his legs, rising from the velvet chair with controlled precision of a man who carried gravity itself in his spine. He wasn't tall in a way that towered, but in a way that demanded the air shift to accommodate him. He stepped forward, closing the space between them, until Wexler, for the first time, felt the quiet menace of proximity. Say it again, Nathaniel said, voice like steel wrapped in velvet. Wexler tried to chuckle, tried to dismiss the weight of the moment, but his laugh came out thin, brittle. I don't think that's necessary. Let's not make this more dramatic than it is. Say it again, Nathaniel repeated, louder this time, the words reverberating off marble and glass, filling every corner of the lobby. Silence swallowed the room. Wexler's throat bobbed. His eyes flickered to the growing semicircle of guests, to the glowing red dot of camera phones recording his every blink, every bead of sweat. He forced a smile that looked more like a grimace. I only meant. No, Nathaniel interrupted, his voice cutting the air clean. You meant exactly what you said, and everyone here heard it. A ripple of agreement rolled through the guests. A woman in a silk dress murmured, Yes, we did. Someone else whispered, Unbelievable. Wexler's arrogance faltered under the collective weight of disapproval, but his pride clung stubbornly. Sir, you're making a scene. Perhaps you should calm down before security is called. Laughter, sharp, disbelieving, burst from a guest recording near the fountain. Calm down? He hasn't even raised his voice. Nathaniel turned then, his eyes sweeping the crowd, his voice carrying with deliberate clarity. Let the record reflect, he said evenly, that I booked the presidential suite under my name, with confirmation weeks in advance. And let it also reflect that I was denied publicly, not because of computer error, not because of the double booking, but because this man, he gestured calmly at Wexler, decided I did not belong in it. The words hung heavy, undeniable. Guests shifted uncomfortably, some nodding, others whispering furiously. One man muttered, "That's a lawsuit waiting to happen." A woman said, "No, that's more than that. That's career-ending." Wexler, cornered but too arrogant to retreat, tried to salvage control. "Sir, I think we've indulged this long enough. If you do not accept the room offered, we may have to ask you to vacate the premises." The arrogance of it landed like a slap. Gasps erupted again, sharper this time. Nathaniel's lips curled in something that wasn't quite a smile. "Vacate the premises," he repeated slowly, as though tasting the words. "Yes," Wexler snapped, clinging to what little power he thought he had left. "This is private property. I am the general manager here, and I have the authority to—" "You have no idea," Nathaniel said, voice suddenly sharp, "what authority is." The room stilled. Every eye widened. And for the first time, a tremor of doubt flickered across Thomas Wexler's face. Nathaniel didn't press further. He didn't need to. He simply stepped back, reclaiming his seat in the lounge chair, posture calm, hands folded on his briefcase, as though nothing at all had happened. But the shift in the room was seismic. The guests weren't looking at Wexler with respect anymore. They were looking at him the way one might look at a man dangling off a cliff, rope fraying. The humiliation wasn't Nathaniel's. Not anymore. It was Wexler's. And though he hadn't realized it yet, his career had just ended in front of every glittering eye and glowing phone camera in that lobby. For a long moment, the lobby of the Sterling Regent stood frozen, as though time itself had hesitated, unsure whether to move forward or retreat. The only sound was a faint gurgle of the central fountain and the restless shuffle of guests whispering into their phones. Nathaniel Cole sat again, perfectly still, as if he had placed himself at the eye of the hurricane. His briefcase rested on his lap, his posture unshaken. The chaos around him seemed to orbit rather than touch him. Across the marble counter, Thomas Wexler fought to reassert himself. His slick-back hair, once immaculate, was damp with the first sheen of sweat. His tie tugged too tight against his throat. But his pride, swollen and fragile, refused to let go. "Sir," Wexler said, voice pitched just above the murmured crowd, "you're disrupting our guests." "I've asked politely. I'll ask one final time. If you cannot accept the accommodations offered, you may leave. Security will escort you out if necessary." The word security crackled like static in the air. Gasps rose from the semicircle of onlookers. Several guests shook their heads, whispering furiously. A middle-aged woman in pearls muttered, "He's making a terrible mistake." Another replied, "He doesn't know who he's talking to. Look at him, calm as stone." Nathaniel did not respond immediately. Instead, with the slow precision of a man who knew he had nothing to prove, he slipped one hand into his jacket and drew out his phone. The small, familiar device looked absurdly ordinary, yet in his hand, it carried the weight of inevitability. He swiped once, lifted it to his ear, and spoke. "Proceed," he said softly. 2 syllables. Nothing more. He lowered the phone and returned it to his pocket with the same unhurried calm with which he had drawn it. He didn't look at Wexler. He didn't explain. He simply folded his hands across his briefcase and leaned back slightly, a man at peace in the very moment designed to unseat him. The silence after those words was uncanny. "Proceed." It lingered in the air, carrying a gravity none of the witnesses could quite define, yet all instinctively felt. Wexler tried to laugh, a brittle sound that cracked against the marble walls. "A phone call? Really? Who did you call?" "Sir, the concierge at the motel down the street. This is my lobby. I run this property. And no amount of posturing changes that." But his laugh did not land. The crowd wasn't with him anymore. Several guests exchanged looks of curiosity. One man whispered, "Proceed? Did you hear how he said it?" Another replied, like it was an order, not a request. The young receptionist who had first checked Nathaniel and looked stricken. She knew, somehow, without knowing how, that this was not the kind of man who spoke empty words. She busied herself furiously with her keyboard, trying to look invisible. Nathaniel finally spoke again, his voice so even it was chilling. "You've made your position clear, and I've made mine." Wexler bristled, taking a step forward. "My position," he snapped, "is that I am responsible for this establishment. As long as I wear this suit and carry this title, I decide who belongs in that suite and who doesn't." Nathaniel tilted his head. Titles are fragile things. The sentence hung like a blade. A ripple went through the crowd. Guests leaned closer, phones lifted higher. The sense of something impending, something seismic, built like pressure in the air before a thunderstorm. A young man in a blazer near the bar muttered, "He's not bluffing. Look at him." His girlfriend clutched his arm, eyes wide. "What's happening? Who is he?" Wexler, hearing the murmurs, turned his frustration on the crowd. "I'd appreciate it if our guests would mind their business," he snapped, his practiced smile cracking. "This is a private matter." But the crowd wasn't dispersing. They weren't guests anymore. They were witnesses, and their eyes told him that much. Nathaniel, unbothered, adjusted the cuff of his sleeve and spoke again, each word measured. "You told me I don't qualify, that I don't belong, that the suite is not for people like me." He let the words echo, his gaze sweeping the marble floor, the gilded walls, the cluster of guests. "Every person here heard you, and every person here will remember it." His tone wasn't raised, yet it filled the lobby like thunder rolling just out of sight. A hush settled. The whispering stopped. For the first time, the manager looked small against the towering backdrop of his own hotel. But still, his pride clawed desperately for purchase. "You think you can intimidate me with vague threats and an audience? You don't frighten me, Mr. Cole. I've worked in hospitality for 20 years. I've dealt with entitled guests who think their money buys them respect. Let me tell you something, it doesn't." The irony twisted the air. The man lecturing about respect was the same who had stripped it from his guest in full public view. Nathaniel didn't flinch. He didn't argue. He simply leaned forward, his voice low, deliberate. "Respect is not bought. It is given. And tonight, you've proven you have none to give." The words cut deeper than a shout ever could. A murmur rippled through the crowd, not shock this time, but agreement. Someone clapped once, quickly, before stopping themselves. Another whispered, "That's it. He's finished." Wexler's face flushed crimson, his composure fractured. He turned on his staff, snapping at the receptionist. "Stop staring and process this man out of here. Do your job." The young woman's hands trembled above the keyboard. She glanced at Nathaniel, then back at her manager, frozen between fear and conscience. "Don't make me repeat myself," Wexler barked. But before she could move, the sound of heavy doors opening carried across the lobby. Every head turned. A line of suited figures entered through the revolving doors. Men and women with sharp eyes, press suits, and the unmistakable aura of authority. They didn't walk like guests. They didn't walk like tourists. They walked like they owned the floor. They stepped on. The whispers surged. Guests craned their necks. Phones zoomed in. Wexler's bravado faltered. His words stumbled. What is this?" Nathaniel remained seated, calm as ever. He adjusted his tie and spoke softly, just loud enough for the room to hear. "This is what happens," he said, "when arrogance mistakes itself for authority." And with that, the storm that had been brewing finally broke. The revolving doors spun slowly, then faster, releasing a stream of dark-suited figures into the gleaming lobby. The shift in atmosphere was immediate, visceral. Like a sudden drop in barometric pressure before a storm tears open the sky, guests instinctively straightened in their seats. Conversations died mid-sentence. Even the fountain seemed to hush itself. The entourage moved with coordinated precision, each step clicking sharply against the marble floor, their gazes fixed, their silence purposeful. At the head of the group strode a tall woman in a charcoal blazer, her expression cut from stone. She scanned the room once, eyes locking immediately on Thomas Wexler. Behind her came two men carrying leather portfolios embossed with a sterling Regent crest, and another woman holding a tablet already glowing with documents. They didn't pause at the concierge. They didn't check in. They headed straight for the counter with the unstoppable momentum of inevitability. "Mr. Wexler," the woman in charcoal said, her voice clear and cold enough to carry across the entire lobby. The manager blinked rapidly, his smirk faltering. "Yes? And you are—" "Marissa Grant," she interrupted, sliding an identification card onto the counter, so quickly it smacked against the marble. "Senior Vice President of Operations, Sterling Hospitality Group." The name landed like a thunderclap. Guests leaned forward, phones angling higher, recording every frame. Wexler's atoms apple-bobbed. He forced a smile. "Ms. Grant, I was expecting." "No," she said sharply. "You weren't, which is why we're here." Her eyes flicked to Nathaniel, seated calmly in the velvet chair as though none of this had anything to do with him. Then, almost reverently, she straightened her posture. "Mr. Cole," she said, inclining her head, "thank you for your patience. We'll handle this immediately." The silence that followed was electric. Every head turned toward Nathaniel. Gasps rippled like a wave through the semicircle of onlookers. A businessman near the bar whispered, "Did she just call him Mr. Cole?" His wife clutched his sleeve, wide-eyed. "Wait, that's Nathaniel Cole." The name spread like wildfire through the lobby. Nathaniel Cole, billionaire investor, founder of Cole Capital, a man whose empire stretched across real estate technology and global hospitality. A man whispered about in Forbes profiles, in business schools, in circles where fortunes rose and fell on his word. The man Wexler had just humiliated in front of 50 witnesses. The weight of it hit Wexler like a tidal wave. His forced smile collapsed entirely. His knees seemed to buckle, but pride kept him upright, trembling. "And Mr. Cole," he stammered, his voice suddenly stripped of bravado. I didn't realize." Nathaniel rose slowly, the motion unhurried, deliberate, the way a king might stand when finally acknowledging his court. His voice, when it came, was measured silk. "You didn't need to realize who I was. You only needed to realize who you were." The sentence sliced the air clean. Guests murmured, some clapping a hand to their mouths, others shaking their heads in disbelief. The phones kept rolling, capturing history as it unfolded in marble and gold. Marissa Grant's tone turned steely. "Mr. Wexler, as of this moment, your employment with Sterling Hospitality Group is terminated. Please surrender your credentials." The word struck harder than a shout. Guests gasped audibly. The young receptionist at the desk covered her mouth with her hand, eyes wide with both shock and vindication. Wexler stumbled, pale. "What? Terminated? You can't." Marissa stepped closer, lowering her voice but not her intensity. "The man you insulted in front of this lobby owns this building. He owns this chain. He signs your paycheck. And tonight, you've proven yourself unworthy of both your position and this company's values." She extended a hand, palm up, "Your badge. Now." Wexler's hands shook as he fumbled with the clip at his breast pocket. The polished rectangle of metal gleamed under the chandelier before clattering onto the marble counter like a gavel striking final judgment. A murmur of approval rippled through the crowd. Someone whispered, "Good riddance." Another muttered, "I've never seen justice delivered this fast." But Wexler wasn't finished. Desperation clawed at him. He turned to Nathaniel, voice breaking. "Mr. Cole, please. This is all a misunderstanding. I was only enforcing policy. I didn't know." Nathaniel's gaze was unflinching, colder than any outburst could have been. "You didn't need to know who I was," he said. "Your job was to respect who I am. A guest, a paying customer, a human being. And you failed." Wexler's mouth opened, closed. The words died on his tongue. Security approached. 2 men in dark uniforms, their presence quiet but commanding. They flanked him without a word. The message was clear. His time here was over. "No, wait." Wexler tried again, his voice cracking now, the arrogance stripped bare to panic. "Please, Enough?" Marissa said, slicing through his protests. She gestured toward the doors. "Escort him out." The sight was surreal. Thomas Wexler, once so smug and untouchable, now herded toward the revolving doors like an unwanted guest, his protest drowned out by the rising murmur of disbelief and awe. Guests lifted their phones higher, some clapping softly, others murmuring about time. The glass door spun, and with one final shove, Wexler was gone, swallowed by the night outside. The silence left behind was deafening. All eyes turned back to Nathaniel. He didn't gloat. He didn't smile. He simply placed his briefcase back on the counter and spoke softly to the trembling young receptionist. "My suite, please." Her hands fumbled on the keyboard, but this time with eagerness, not reluctance. "Why, yes, Mr. Cole. Right away, sir." She printed the key card, sliding it across the counter with both hands. Almost bowing, Nathaniel accepted it without flourish, tucking it neatly into his pocket. Then, turning to Marissa, he inclined his head. "Thank you," he said simply. Marissa's eyes softened just slightly. "It's we who should thank you, Mr. Cole, for your patience and for your reminder." The lobby buzzed with whispers, with awe, with the electric thrill of having witnessed a man's downfall and another's quiet dominance. Guests would tell the story for years. Of the night the hotel manager insulted the wrong man, and justice arrived in black cars within minutes. Nathaniel turned once toward the cluster of guests, his gaze sweeping calmly over the cameras still recording. His voice was low, but it carried. "Respect is not optional. Remember that." And with that, he walked toward the gilded elevators, each step measured, unhurried, the quiet thunder of authority echoing across marble. The door slid shut behind him, leaving the lobby buzzing with murmurs, the image of a man destroyed, and a haunting lesson of what it truly means to hold power without raising your voice. The storm had broken, but the aftershocks were just beginning. The elevator doors slid shut with a soft metallic sigh, carrying Nathaniel Cole upward toward the suite that had been denied him minutes before. His reflection lingered in the golden panels, calm, expressionless, like a judge who had already delivered his verdict. But down in the lobby, the echoes of that verdict were still rippling outward. Guests stood in clusters, buzzing with disbelief, whispering furiously to one another. The glow of phone screens lit their faces like campfires as they replayed the videos they had captured, clips already being uploaded, shared, broadcast. A story that had unfolded in hushed piano notes and marble grandeur was now racing into the digital bloodstream of the world. The young receptionist still stood frozen behind the counter, heart hammering in her chest. Her hands, which had trembled under Wexler's orders, were steadier now, but only because she clung to the truth of what she had just witnessed. She had seen arrogance collapse. She had seen justice arrive in tailored suits. And she had seen Nathaniel Cole, a man of impossible influence, thank her, a nobody on the payroll, with quiet respect. That moment seared itself into her memory like a brand. Marissa Grant, the senior vice president, remained in the lobby, conferring with her colleagues in clipped tones. Already, decisions were being made, statements drafted, damage control strategized. But the truth was simple. There was no damage to contain. The videos would tell the story. The humiliation was too public, too raw. Sterling hospitality could only survive it by embracing it, by showing that rot had been cut out at the root. As for Thomas Wexler, the man who once strutted through this marble palace like a minor king, he was nowhere to be seen. Outside, under the awning of the Grand Hotel entrance, he stood in the drizzle of night, his suit damp, his phone pressed to his ear. Call after call went unanswered. Former allies suddenly silent, friends too busy to reply. He paced like a ghost, repeating half-formed explanations to no one, his words swallowed by the rain. The man who had barked orders only minutes before was now just another unemployed voice in the night. His empire of arrogance had collapsed in the span of a single conversation. Back upstairs, the elevator doors opened with a soft chime. Nathaniel stepped into a private corridor that led directly to the presidential suite. A butler in white gloves stood waiting, bowing slightly. "Mr. Cole, welcome. Your suite is ready." Nathaniel nodded once, stepping inside. The room unfolded in opulent silence. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the glittering city skyline, velvet drapes drawn back, to reveal the heartbeat of downtown, a table set with champagne on ice. The suite had been polished to perfection, a stage awaiting its rightful guest. But Nathaniel ignored the champagne. He placed his briefcase on the mahogany desk and stood at the window, looking down at the very lobby where the storm had erupted. From this height, the guests were only shadows moving across marble. Yet he knew each one carried the story with them now. Each one would tell again and again, in restaurants, in boardrooms, in whispers over cocktails. I was there the night Nathaniel Cole took back his own hotel. His phone buzzed once on the desk. A message from Chloe, his chief of staff, as efficient and precise as ever. Termination paperwork already in progress. HR will scrub Wexler's record from our leadership ranks. Media inquiries incoming. Recommend short control statement. Respect is non-negotiable. Nathaniel allowed himself the faintest exhale. Not relief, not satisfaction. Just confirmation. The system had responded, as it should. He typed only 2 words in reply. Do it. Then he returned to the window, his eyes distant. Down in the lobby, the scene had shifted. Guests weren't just buzzing anymore. They were approaching staff, some offering quiet words of solidarity. Others demanded to know how such a man could have been employed at all. The young receptionist answered what she could, her voice trembling but growing steadier with each word. She realized something profound in that moment. Fear had been Wexler's currency, but now he was gone. Marissa addressed the lobby formally, her voice strong, unwavering. Ladies and gentlemen, we thank you for your patience. The incident you witnessed tonight was unacceptable and immediate action has been taken. Sterling Hospitality does not tolerate prejudice in any form, not toward our guests, not toward our employees. Respect is not a slogan for us. It is policy. A ripple of applause followed, hesitant at first, then stronger. Guests weren't just clapping for the company's statement. They were clapping for the man who had forced it to exist. Upstairs, Nathaniel finally sat, not at the dining table or on the velvet couch, but at the desk. He opened his briefcase, drew out a slim notebook, and began to write. Not an email, not a press release, just a simple note in his own hand. The kind of record Marcus Aurelius might have kept centuries before. Power does not reveal character. Power exposes it. Tonight, one man revealed himself unworthy of authority, and one company was reminded of what authority truly is. The choice to uphold dignity, even when no one is watching. Especially then. He closed the notebook and set it aside. The lesson was complete. The fallout would be swift. By dawn, clips of the confrontation would blaze across every platform. Hashtags trending. Think pieces drafted. Pundits dissecting the quiet authority of Nathaniel Cole against the loud collapse of Thomas Wexler. Some would call it poetic justice. Others would call it corporate accountability. But those who had been in that lobby would know the truth. It wasn't spectacle. It was principle. By the end of the week, Sterling Hospitality's board would announce sweeping reforms, training programs, oversight committees, a new public ethos built around respect as a measurable value, not a marketing word. Investors would breathe easier, reassured that Nathaniel Cole's hand remained steady at the helm. And Wexler? He would disappear into obscurity, his name forever linked to a viral downfall. Job applications unanswered. Industry doors slammed shut. His story reduced to a cautionary tale whispered in back offices. Don't be a Wexler. But Nathaniel would never speak of him again, because this was never about one man's arrogance. It was about the lesson. That dignity is not optional. That respect is the foundation of all business. That authority means nothing unless it is wielded in defense of those who have none. Back in the presidential suite, Nathaniel dimmed the lights and poured himself a glass of water. Not champagne, not whiskey, just water. He sipped it slowly, gazing out over the city lights as the storm of the night settled into memory. Somewhere below, guests still whispered, still recorded, still marveled at what they had seen. But Nathaniel was already moving on. The lesson had been delivered. The world would carry it forward. For him, it was simple. Respect is not negotiable. And those who forgot that, whether in a lobby, a boardroom, or a first-class cabin, would learn, sooner or later, that power doesn't shout. It doesn't need to. Power simply speaks, and the world listens. If you like this story, please subscribe to support this channel.